It was my 74th birthday. The candles burned low on the cake. Family filled the long table. Laughter bounced off the walls. My daughter stood up. She smiled, her diamond ring flashing under the lights. She handed me a small package. Everyone leaned forward. I tore the paper. Inside, a pair of cheap socks. The room exploded in laughter. Her husband smirked. She laughed the loudest. I forced a smile, but inside, something broke. I looked at those socks. $2 of cloth. That was how much my daughter thought her father was worth. No one noticed the silence in my eyes. No one cared about the weight in my chest. Not one soul at that table remembered the years I spent breaking my back to raise her, to build her life, to give her everything. They thought it was funny. I thought it was final. I raised my glass. My hand didn't shake. And I whispered to myself, this is the last time I'll sit here, quietly. Because they didn't know the truth. They didn't know the land I bought, the vineyards I planted, the company I built in silence. I folded that company into acres of ground and rows of vines. Quiet assets no one in Denver cared to see. $8 million, buried in stone and soil, waiting for the right moment, and that moment was coming. So if you've ever seen betrayal inside your own family, if you've ever felt the sting of being mocked by the people you love, stay with me, because my story isn't about pain. It's about revenge. Silent, cold, final. I was born with calloused hands, not from choice, from survival. For 50 years, I laid brick after brick across Denver, schools, homes, office towers that scraped the winter sky. People walk past those buildings without ever knowing my name. But my daughter, she knew, or at least she used to. I raised her alone after her mother passed. I kept her mother's name close to my chest, Evelyn Grant, saving it for a purpose she would one day understand. I cooked simple meals. I walked her to piano lessons. I sat in cold bleachers watching her games, no matter the weather. Every scar on my hands was for her future. Every drop of sweat was for her comfort. And I never complained, not once. Neighbors would tell me, Harold, you should rest. You've done enough. But I couldn't, because my daughter was my reason. I remember nights I came home so tired. I couldn't unclench my fists, but I still kissed her goodnight, still whispered, you deserve better than I had. Denver grew richer. The city lights climbed higher, but I stayed in my modest home, quiet, invisible. To the world, I was just another old man in work boots. To her, I thought I was still a father worth respect. I was wrong. I can't forget one night in Denver. The air smelled of rain. She had just turned 12. I saved for months, skipped meals, worked double shifts, all for one gift. A second-hand piano. The wood was scratched. The keys were chipped. But when she saw it, her face lit brighter than any sunrise over the Rockies. She ran her hands across the keys. Her small fingers stumbled, but the sound was beautiful to me, because it was hers. That night, she hugged me tight. Her tears wet my shirt. She whispered, Daddy, I'll never forget this. I believed her, every word. For years after, that piano filled our little house. Notes of joy, notes of hope, notes that drowned out the silence of a missing mother. I would sit by the doorway, hands aching, boots still covered in cement, and I would listen. It was the only music my life ever had. That memory kept me alive. It told me I was more than just a laborer. It told me I mattered, at least to her. But memories fade, and promises, they die. Because years later, when she laughed at my birthday table, it was not the girl with shining eyes I remembered. It was a stranger. One who forgot the sound of her own piano. Years passed. The piano gathered dust, and so did the promises. On my 74th birthday, we gathered at a steakhouse in downtown Denver. The tables smelled of smoke and bourbon. The chatter was loud, too loud. My daughter sat across from me. Her dress shimmered. Her husband bragged about a new house in Aspen. They spoke of vacations, parties, cars. Not once did they look my way. I cut into the steak. It tasted like ash. I raised my glass once, hoping for her eyes. But she was busy laughing at her husband's jokes. The same girl who once cried over a secondhand piano now looked at me as if I were nothing but old furniture. The waiter set down my cake. 74 candles, a flame for every sacrifice. I made a wish, not for more years, but for clarity. Then came the gift. A small box, wrapped in cheap paper. I tore it open. Inside, socks. Thin, colorless, worth less than a cup of coffee. The table erupted in laughter. Her husband clapped his hands. My daughter giggled like a child. And I smiled. But my chest burned like coal. They thought it was harmless fun. I knew it was the last straw. In that moment, sitting in the glow of cheap candles and cruel laughter, I decided I would stop being invisible, and I would show them who I truly was. The laughter still rang in my ears. I stared at those socks, my smile frozen. Then I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Jack, an old friend from the trade. We had poured concrete together when we were young men in Denver. His back was bent now, his hair white, but his eyes sharp as ever. He leaned close. His voice cut through the noise. "Harold, you gave her your whole life, and tonight she gave you nothing." I swallowed hard. He was right, but hearing it from him, it stung deeper than the laughter. Jack squeezed my shoulder. "You don't deserve this. You've built more than she will ever know." Then he walked away, leaving me with the echo of truth. I looked back at the table. My daughter was still laughing, her husband waving for another drink. Not one glance at me, not one flicker of respect, and something snapped inside. For 74 years, I had been silent. For 74 years, I had built stone on stone, dream on dream, all for her. But Jack's words peeled away the last layer of patience. They told me what I already knew. This wasn't just a birthday. This was the beginning. I raised my glass one more time. No one noticed, and I whispered to myself, "Next time, she won't laugh." The night ended in smoke and laughter, but not from me. I left the steakhouse quietly, my boots heavy against the cold Denver pavement. The city lights blurred, but my mind was clear. Jack's words kept ringing. "You don't deserve this." He was right. I didn't. The next morning, I made a call, my voice steady. My daughter answered. She sounded surprised, perhaps guilty. I didn't care. "Linda," I said, "come see me next week. I want to show you something." She hesitated, then she agreed. Her tone carried a trace of arrogance, as if she thought I wanted to apologize. But I wasn't the same man she laughed at. Not anymore. For days, I prepared. Not papers, not speeches, just silence. I walked the grounds outside the old stone house I had kept hidden near red rocks. Vines curled around the fences. The earth carried decades of labor no one knew but me. I brushed dust off the iron gate. It groaned open, heavy with secrets, and I imagined her face when she saw it. The house, the land, the life she never cared to ask about. That thought didn't make me smile. It made me calm, cold, because I knew the day she arrived, the game would change. And this time, she wouldn't leave laughing. The week passed quickly, too quickly. That morning, clouds hung low over Denver. The air carried a bite of winter. I stood at the old stone house near Red Rocks, waiting. Then I heard it. The crunch of tires on gravel. Her car. Linda stepped out, her heels clicking against the driveway. Her husband followed, sunglasses hiding his eyes. They looked around, confused. This place was no restaurant, no retirement home. She frowned. "Dad, what is this?" I didn't answer. I turned toward the iron gate. Rust clung to its hinges. I placed my hand on the cold metal and pushed. The gate groaned open, and behind it stretched acres of vineyard, rows of green carved into the earth. At the center stood the house, tall, unyielding. Built from stone, I had laid myself. Linda's laughter died in her throat. Her husband's smirk vanished. They froze. "This is mine," I said. "Every brick, every vine, every inch of soil. 45 years in silence. The wind carried my words across the land. They trembled, though I stood calm. I watched their eyes dart from the fields to the house, calculating, greedy, scared. And for the first time in years, I felt no weight on my chest, only cold clarity, because the game had changed. And they knew it. They stared at the house as if it had risen from the earth overnight. But this wasn't magic. It was sweat. It was silence. It was me. Linda finally found her voice. Dad, I don't understand. How long have you had this? I looked across the vineyard. The rows stretched into the horizon, each one a line of my life. 45 years, I said. Every dollar I earned, every bone I broke, every deal I made in the shadows of Denver. It all came here. Her husband stepped forward. This must be worth millions. I met his eyes. 8 million, give or take. Silence. The kind that cuts deeper than words. I could see it in their faces. The hunger, the greed, the panic. Because they thought they knew me. They thought I was just a tired old man with calloused hands. But they never asked. They never cared. Linda's lips trembled. Her eyes searched mine as if trying to rewrite history. Why didn't you ever tell me? I held up the socks she had given me. Thin, cheap, forgettable. This is why. Because this is how you see me. Her face paled. Her husband shifted uncomfortably. And I felt nothing. No anger, no joy. Just cold truth. For the first time in my life, I was no longer invisible. I was untouchable. Linda's voice cracked. All these years, why didn't you say anything? The wind tugged at my coat. The vineyard swayed like a sea of green. I kept my eyes on the horizon. Because respect can't be bought, I said. And love shouldn't come with a price tag. I thought of the nights I came home, bones aching, pockets nearly empty. She never asked where the money went. She never asked how I kept the lights on. She just lived, and I let her. I wanted her to learn humility, to understand value, not just dollars, but sacrifice. That's why I stayed silent. I let her think we were poor, because I wanted her to see people, not price tags, to see her father, not just a wallet, but the socks. They told me everything. That cheap little gift said more than words ever could. It told me how little I mattered. Her husband finally spoke. So now what? You punish her? You punish us? I turned to him, calm as stone. This isn't punishment. This is truth. And truth doesn't negotiate. Linda shook her head. Tears welled in her eyes. But I felt no mercy. Not anymore. Because silence had been my lesson. And betrayal was her answer. Now, it was time for mine. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out the box she had given me a week earlier. The paper was torn, the edges frayed. Inside, the same pair of thin, colorless socks. I held them high. The wind whipped around us, but my voice cut through it. This, I said, is how you see me. Linda's face went pale. Her husband shifted uneasily, eyes darting to the ground. $2 of cloth, I continued. After 74 years of breaking my body, this is what I'm worth to you. She shook her head. Dad, it was just a joke. A joke? I snapped. The vineyard fell silent. Every scar, every sleepless night, every brick I laid, reduced to a joke. Tears welled in her eyes. She reached out, but I stepped back. Do you remember the piano? I asked. Her lips trembled. You said you'd never forget. And yet, here we are. The socks fluttered in my hand like a white flag. But this wasn't surrender. This was evidence. Evidence of disrespect. Evidence of betrayal. I dropped them at her feet. The dirt swallowed them, just like it had swallowed 45 years of silence. She bent to pick them up, but I stopped her. Leave them. They belong here, buried, like every promise you ever broke. Linda stood frozen. Her husband's arm brushed hers, steadying her. The socks lay in the dirt between us, like a verdict already delivered. I took a breath, the kind that clears the fog from your chest. I built all of this, I said, sweeping my hand across the land. Every acre, every vine, every stone in that house. Their eyes followed my hand, then snapped back to me, hungry, desperate. I let the silence hang. Then I spoke. But not 1 inch will belong to you. Linda gasped. Her husband stiffened. I pulled a folded paper from my coat. The ink still fresh. The signatures real. My estate, every dollar, every asset, has been signed to the Evelyn Grant Foundation, a scholarship fund for children who have no one. Her lips trembled. Dad, no, you can't. I can, and I did. She took a step toward me, her voice breaking. After everything you've done for me, you'd take it all away? I shook my head. No, Linda, you took it away. With every moment of disregard, with every laugh at my expense, with every gift that mocked a lifetime of sacrifice. The paper crackled in my hand. Her tears spilled. Her husband stared at the ground, silent, defeated, and I felt nothing but cold resolve. This land will raise children who respect it, not heirs who trample it. Linda's tears streaked her cheeks. Her husband finally found his voice. We'll fight this. We'll challenge it in court. I almost smiled, because I had been waiting for those words. Behind them, footsteps echoed on the gravel. Jack emerged from the shadows of the vineyard. His cane tapped the ground, steady, unhurried. Linda turned, startled. Who is this? I met Jack's eyes. He's the man who stood beside me when I laid my first foundation, and the man who stood beside me when I signed my last. Jack pulled a folder from his coat, leather-bound, worn from use. Inside, paper stamped, sealed, untouchable. He spoke, his voice sharp as stone. The estate is locked, every signature witnessed, every clause airtight. There is no court, no lawyer, no loophole that can undo this. Linda's face drained of color. Her husband's shoulders slumped. Jack handed me the folder. Your legacy is safe, Harold. Safer than most men ever manage. I nodded. For the first time in years, gratitude flickered in my chest. Not warm, but steady. Linda whispered, You planned this? All along? I looked at her. At the girl who once played broken notes on a chipped piano. At the woman who now stood broken herself. Yes, I said. For 45 years, I planned to build. And for one night, I planned to reveal. The rest was inevitable. The folder snapped shut in my hands. The sound was final, like a gavel striking. Linda staggered back. Her husband grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. Tears streamed down her face. $8 million, she whispered. Gone. Just like that. Her voice cracked. Her knees buckled. She sank into the dirt, her designer dress stained by soil she never cared to touch. Her husband stared at the vineyard, his jaw clenched. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. Even he knew the fight was over. I looked at them, two figures broken under the weight of greed, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt free. Linda pressed her hands to her face. Dad, please. I didn't mean it. I didn't know. But the words were empty, because the truth was written in laughter, in smirks, in socks dropped at my feet. Her cries grew louder, echoing off the stones of the house. Her husband turned away from her, ashamed, defeated. I stood silent, watching the collapse I had built with patience, not rage. This was not violence. This was justice. The vineyard swayed in the wind, untouched by her grief. The house stood tall, unmoved by her tears, and I stood taller than both, because in that moment, I was no longer just her father. I was the man who could not be forgotten. Her cries echoed through the vineyard, sharp, desperate, but they no longer touched me. For years, I dreamed of revenge. I thought I'd feel fire. I thought I'd feel triumph. But standing there, I felt nothing. No rage, no joy, just silence. The house behind me stood tall. The vines swayed in the wind. Both would outlast her tears. Both would outlast me. Linda crawled forward, hands clutching at the dirt. Dad, I can change. Please, just give me another chance. Her words broke in the cold air. I looked down at her. At the daughter who once played broken notes on a chipped piano, at the woman who now broke herself on the weight of greed. And I understood. Revenge wasn't fire, it wasn't fury, it was frost, it was silence. It was watching the guilty collapse under the weight of their own choices. I whispered, barely more than breath. Justice doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It simply stands and waits. She wept harder. Her husband turned away, unable to face her or me. I straightened my back, 74 years behind me. But for the first time, I stood taller than ever. The world had tried to bury me in socks and laughter. Instead, I buried them in silence. The cries faded behind me. The vineyard stretched ahead, bathed in gold. The sun dipped low over red rocks, casting long shadows across the land I had bled for. I walked slowly, each step lighter than the last. For 74 years, my back bent under labor, under silence, under disappointment. But tonight, I stood tall. The house loomed against the horizon, not as a monument of wealth, but as proof that I had lived and built and endured. I paused by the gate, the same gate I once opened with trembling hands. Now it stood wide, letting truth spill out like the setting sun. I thought of the piano, of chipped keys and small hands pressing them with wonder. That memory had carried me through storms, and tonight, it carried me to peace. I didn't feel pity. I did not feel rage. I felt release. Justice had not come with fire, not with noise, but with silence. And silence was enough. I whispered into the dusk, justice isn't loud. It simply waits. And when it arrives, it never leaves. The wind carried my words across the vineyard, through the vines, through the stones, through the years yet to come. And I knew, as the last light fell, that my story was no longer just mine. It belonged to the land, to the silence, to justice itself. The vineyard grew quiet again. The sun had vanished. Only the chill of night remained. I stood at the edge of the land, listening to the silence. It was heavier than her cries, stronger than her excuses, and far more honest. This was my ending. Not a triumphant roar, not a violent act, just the weight of truth laid bare in the soil. But as I looked at the house, I knew something else. This story wasn't only mine. It belonged to anyone who had ever been betrayed by their own blood, to anyone who had ever given everything and received nothing, to anyone who has tasted silence and turned it into strength. So I ask you, have you ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most? What would you have done in my place? Think about it, because betrayal is not rare. It walks beside us, hidden behind smiles, waiting at family tables. And justice, it comes slowly, it comes quietly. But when it arrives, it stays. If this story reached you, if it touched the part of you that knows betrayal, share your thoughts below. Your story matters more than you think. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of silence, betrayal, and justice, then stay. Subscribe. Because I promise you, this isn't the last story I have to tell. The vineyard sleeps tonight, but justice never sleeps.